right, welcome to the Cory Morgan Show. This is the new and improved one. We took a hiatus, a little break over summer there. We've had some great viewership over the fall and winter since we got this rolling, and we thought it was time to up our game. You can see there's some better lighting. My glasses aren't glaring at you as much as they used to. That forehead shine where my hair used to be isn't so bad. James has been doing some excellent work getting our equipment up to speed and better sound, so you can enjoy my ranting, raving, and going on with much better sound quality and see my pretty face and smile in a much more crystal clear picture. So, I'm going to have Clinton Desveaux coming on in a short while. We'll talk to him about the federal scene. We got a federal election coming clearly this fall. It's time to start really speculating and seeing what's going to go on throughout that. It'll be a good chat, and of course, I'm going to run through a few news items, things going on through this week. To start with, though, the reason we got this new gear, the reason things are improving is because of our subscribers and our members, and it's really important to us. You know, we're not the CBC. We're not one of those other media outlets that are taking direct government subsidies or grants. The government's not offering us any money, and we haven't been taking any of that money. We rely on you guys to get in there, subscribe. It's a great deal. You know, go to westernstandardonline.com, take out a subscription. For $10 a month, you're getting all the content, the news, the great stuff that's coming through. As cheap as newspaper subscriptions were, 10, 20 years ago. Well, now you can get it online, and through this, it supports us, and we can keep producing this content. So thank you to all those people who are already members, and to you who aren't a member yet, get on there. It's a great package. It helps us out, and then we can keep producing stuff for you guys. The other part, of course, it's been really critical, and it's great. The more members we get, the more viewers and readers we get, the more sponsors we get. And we've got some great sponsors here. I'll start out with the CCFR. That's the Canadian Coalition for Firearm Rights. These guys are been sponsoring us for some time. Nobody works as hard for you as the CCFR for your ability to own and use firearms. And even that use part, you got to remember that. The Liberals want to take it away. I mean, they talk about collectors even. People, it shouldn't be anybody's business of what you want to do with your firearms other than your own anyways. But they want to say, well, if you just cut it off and hang it on a wall as a collector's piece, that's good enough. No, that's not good enough. They want to get rid of your firearms through attrition, through slowly regulating them to death. And we got to push back. We got to stand up for our property rights, for our rights as individuals. The CCFR is doing that for you. They're working on it. They're taking the government to court on this. So remember that, the Canadian Coalition for Firearm Rights, and their site is at firearmrights.ca. If you're listening there rather than viewing, firearmrights.ca. And if you click on Why Join, they'll lay out all of the good reasons that you should join them, support them, because they're supporting you and your rights. Our other sponsor, and these guys are fun, is the Resistance Coffee Company. They're local, they're from the West. They're coffee brewers. They come up with all these great, fun, interesting names for their coffees, like Liberal Tears, Defund the CBC, Empty Promises for their decaf. I've ordered their coffee. I've had it at home. It's good coffee. You don't have to buy it and gag down a bad coffee just to make a statement. You're winning. It's good stuff. And they take 10% of every purchase, and they put it towards good groups and causes who are fighting for individual rights, as opposed to so many of those other virtue signaling companies. You buy a product and find out part of your purchase price went towards some crappy woke cause that's probably trying to put you out of work in the oil field or something like that. You don't have to worry about that with the Resistance Coffee Company. They take 10%, they give it to good causes. You can find it on their site at resistancecoffee.com. You'll see where they're putting that portion of your purchase towards. They ship it to your house, comes quickly, conveniently, and if it's your first order at resistancecoffee.com, you put in the promo code Western Standard, all one word, all lowercase, and you'll get 10% off your first order. So you think about that. 10% of your purchase is going to go towards supporting good causes that are standing up for you. 10% is coming off the price for you. You're supporting a sponsor who's supporting the Standard, and you're getting good coffee. This is just win all around. Really give these guys a shot. Get out there, show them the support for the Western Standard, support for non-woke companies, and enjoy some good coffee. So thanks again to the Resistance Coffee Company. So I'll get into just, it's been a while. I haven't done the live show in a couple of weeks. I need to rant, get things off my chest. I should say, I will miss the comments coming from people while I was going. That's one downside of going this route. But you can always email me at cmorgan@westernstandardonline.com if you've got comments or ideas and things like that. And I'll happily respond to things within reason. If you're unreasonable, I'll just ignore you. We'll take that as it comes. So the Stampede has ended, and it sounds like, the turnout was limited, but things went all right. The world didn't end. The plague hasn't been erupting in any sort of crazy way, despite all the doomsayers. It was a great exposure of hypocrisy. It was fun to watch, Rachel Notley and a lot of municipal candidates and campaigners who were saying, oh, Jason Kenney's being irresponsible. We can't open this early. The Stampede's going to be a death trap. Well, they were all out barbecuing and campaigning and shaking hands and kissing asses in full force for this Stampede. So they seem to have forgotten how dangerous it was supposed to be. They got over it because, you know what? The priority of campaigning during a prime campaign time is much more important to them than their BS virtue signaling about keeping people safe through restrictions in the COVID-19. And it's just nice to see that exposed, and I do love to point out hypocrisy when I see it. And our NDP and some others never hesitate to give me material to work on with that. So other announcements we saw, it's this long campaign kind of going on provincially. Jason Kenney has talked about putting daylight savings to a referendum question. I know people say it sounds like it's kind of petty, it's minor. It is in a way, but let's just get it done. I mean, I'm not even going to take a side out. What I am seeing is the direct democracy that's coming out. We're going to have a number of things coming on the ballot this fall to pick and choose from, and it's really a means of government I want to see more of. For the most part, I trust the voters. I want them to make a choice on matters. I know they don't always make a choice I agree with, and the head and inch, he was mayor over and over again. But you know what? He won. And it means that we didn't come up with a good enough campaign to unseat the guy. That's up to us, and that's on us. So referendums, bring them on. Let's make our choices. Take it out of the hands of those clowns in government sometimes, and we'll get things done. Make it definitive. I can't believe we've been fighting over this for so long. Now, we've got a crisis coming on every level of government. With the pandemic and just with the ongoing trends and everything, we've been spending too much money. Our deficits are terrifying. Our debt is terrifying. The federal debt is over $1 trillion. I mean, it's unimaginable for a country this size. And of course, the usual arguments come along. Do we tax our way out of it, or do we cut some spending? And I'm seeing actually very little from anybody talking about cutting spending, which is really frightening. The Trudeau government now is starting to talk about a wealth tax. They're talking about coming after your inheritance. They're talking about all sorts of other ways to grab more money from us to pay off their massive spending. And that is distressing. And wealth taxes, I mean, they've been shown over and over. Yeah, you can go out and shallowly target that handful of mega rich people out there, and there's a handful of them. They're already paying loads of tax, contrary to what a lot of people believe. The best you're going to accomplish is a small dent in your deficit because you haven't reduced the spending. You've done some virtue signaling, I guess, for the politics of envy to show those mean, nasty people who managed to make a good fortune for themselves. But you really haven't addressed the base problem. One thing again, seeing promising out of the Kenney government, finally, seeing some action. I'm surprised he waited 2 years before starting this battle, but he proposed a 3% wage cut for nurses in Alberta. See, this is where we do have to get courageous. We've got to get out there. We've got to get our spending in line. Our biggest ticket spending items are healthcare and education, and the biggest parts of those are wages. And we can't get around it. I know people like to talk around, we just need to cut administration, we need to cut managers. Yeah, we do. There's room to cut there too. But let's face it, the vast bulk of the spending are the frontline people. It's not saying we don't value them. It's not saying they're not doing important work. It's not saying they're bad people, but we've got to get realistic. I'm going to go on a side tangent about some of the fun I've had in the last week. I like to mess around on social media. For those who don't follow Twitter, I threw a tweet out. I do that. I'm just as lovable and non-abrasive on Twitter as I am on here, so I tick some people off now and then. But something really interesting, when I put one out it was from the Taxpayers Federation, showing, because we got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of nurses who are making over $130,000 a year. We've got one nurse who made $250,000. Now, again, I don't begrudge them making some decent money, but when our budgets are blown, we got to start re-examining some of these things. And when you look further, what you find out is they've got quite a government overtime scheme going on. I mean, if you are part-time, that's why loads of them are part-time. They put their schedule out, they have to put it out something like 12 weeks in advance. You get these X days, say that you're not going to want to work on them, you put the X on it. And then, and not saying every nurse is doing it, but we've had enough people talking about it, you get a friend to drop out of their shift, you get other people to move things around. Well, if you get put into a shift slot that you didn't originally sign up for, you get double time for that. You could be working a 40-hour week, and half of your week is actually at double time because of the overtime clauses in your contract with the union. And people keep saying, well, They don't want to bring nurses on full-time because of the benefits they would have to pay. What are left? The part-time nurses with the agreements they got, with the pension, the benefits, everything else, there's not much more difference that's going to come if you've got them officially as full-time and in for 40 hours a week. You know, when they're threatening to strike over a 3% wage cut, well, why don't we look then about streamlining what we got? Why don't we get them all working 40 hours a week and at regular pay for that, like everybody else in the real world has to, and paying overtime for when you go beyond that, of course, because it's above and beyond. But either way, putting that tweet out just sent them off the handle. And this has happened to me a number of times. It's always with the nurses. It's interesting, and it shows how, you see, because the civil service has been prepping for a battle, the unions, for some time now, and they're organized. So suddenly a tweet, 2 days after I throw it out, I've forgotten about it. Bang, explodes on the scroll. I got all these accounts just going crazy on me, calling me every name in the book. A lot of them are putting out all these talking points. They're talking about how much the Kenny staffers are made. They're talking about how much oil field people made. And these are like American accounts. I mean, how would they even know the names of these staffers? The bottom line is these unions are set up and they're organized and they're smart and they target things that are contrary to their opinion. And they basically do the Twitter version of shouting it down. They want to bully and push a person off of that stance because they don't want it coming up, they don't want it up for discussion, and they want people scared to touch that hot potato. And it's happened to me 4 times now in almost the same way. It's always the nurses. It's kind of like when you think of the left at universities when there's a speaker they don't like. What do? They go standing outside of the forum with air horns and tambourines and drums and try and drown out the speaker rather than actually take on the case of something they don't like or don't agree with. And we're seeing it on every front. If you get around the city much, you look on lawns. I mean, it hasn't been an election period for 2 years in Alberta, but you've got all of these Corplast signs. Usually a lawn will have 3 or 4 of them because the union members are getting these because the campaign's already on, and it's the Save Our Parks, it's the anti-coal, it's the Protect Our Teachers, it's the Save Our Nurses. Listen to the radio ads, look at the TV ads. These guys have been in campaign mode for 2 years already. They got a taste of power when Notley was in for 4 years, and they want it back, and they want it in a bad way. And now, Jason Kenney at least he knows you're never going to balance the budget unless you take on the public sector unions. Ralph Klein did it. It was tough. They went nuts. They screamed. They yelled. They protested en masse. I remember it well at the legislature. The irony was he cut so many members from the civil service. I saw no difference in the service. What were those guys doing in the first place? There's a lot of dead weight to be cut. We have to be realistic about it, but it takes a lot of courage and a lot of leadership. We'll see if Kenney blinks on this. I mean, that's just the first step. And boy, he sure took on one of the hardest because people like to canonize nurses. They're saving lives during the pandemic. These are Florence Nightingales. We can't dare, cut these nurses. Well, we're not saying they're bad, but we've got to get reasonable. Everything comes with a price and a cost. So open up that can of worms. Let's dig into it. Let's get her done. He sure picked a tough one to begin with. He's picked a fight with doctors too, which wasn't appreciated, and he didn't do it well. But this can be done. We need to do that as well with the teachers. That's another big one hiding out there. And with the AUPE, that's the Alberta Union of Provincial Employees, they want a 5% raise right now. We are in an economic catastrophe right now. We just can't afford to keep going on like this. So we need some leadership, showing some balls, taking on these guys who are bankrupting us. Let's see if the UCP can hold on to this. We'll see. Their record so far hasn't been terribly promising. Either way, I got that off my chest. I'm going to get on to Clinton here, and we'll talk about some things on the federal front and, the election campaign that's more formal and it's approaching us fast. All right. Well, Clinton Desveaux is back with me. Good to see you, Clinton. It's always good to get you on. The summer's rolling along. The unofficial election campaign's definitely on. Justin Trudeau made a surprise appearance in Calgary. And when we see a Liberal leader in Calgary, we know that there's got to be an election coming because they usually don't want to come here for anything if they can possibly help it. You've always been one who's watching the polls very closely and looking at the broader picture on the federal front. So for a long time, the Conservatives had a really stubborn, gap between them and the Liberals. They haven't been able to close it, it seems. And now we've had 2 polls pop up that show that maybe this race might be a little tighter than things had been indicating. What have you seen, Clinton?
Yeah, so we've seen 2 polls come out over the last week, one from Angus Reid and one from Leger, 2 respective polling agencies, that have shown that the gap between the federal Liberals and the federal Conservatives has shrunk somewhere between 2 to 3 points is the spread. So it looks promising. if you're a Conservative Party voter, but there's still some questions and concerns around both of these polls, and specifically, it's the regional breakdown. So what we're finding when we examine the regional breakdown is the Liberals have a clear and solid lead in Atlantic Canada, same thing in Quebec, a solid lead in Ontario, very competitive in British Columbia, and where we've seen a big rebound in Conservative Party support tends to be in Alberta and Saskatchewan. After examining sort of a closer look at Alberta and Saskatchewan, the rural parts of the province have shown a real spike in Conservative Party support, which has helped elevate their national number. But the more urban areas like Edmonton and Calgary, for example, it's still not in the bag for the Conservatives, and it's still a competitive race in your two largest cities. So that kind of gives us a glimpse of what's happening in this particular moment in time.
Yeah, well, we've been seeing some movement even here in Calgary. One of our city councilors has suddenly announced, actually, and by no coincidence, he was touring the city with Justin Trudeau, so you kind of knew he was going to be going federal. But he's given up a very lucrative city councilor job to make a run for the federal Liberals in Calgary. He wouldn't do that if he didn't think he had a pretty good chance of winning that seat. There's a lot of speculation that Naheed Nenshi might be making that leap as well. Like that's one of those presumptions we keep making in the West, is that the Liberals, are going to get shut out here. But in our urban areas, Edmonton and Calgary, there's some very strong possibilities. I imagine it's the same in Regina, and definitely Vancouver has a great deal of swing seats going on. So it's tough to read in a lot into these polls yet, eh?
Yeah, well, one of the things to keep in mind, the mayor of Calgary, I apologize, his name is Nenshi, is that correct?
That's right, Naheed Nenshi, yeah.
Yeah, so with Mayor Nenshi, I'm not 100% convinced that he's actually going to run for the federal Liberals. I think the more likely scenario is that they would probably want to appoint him to the Senate. And that's because that would allow the government to cut off the conservative the Alberta elected Senate process that you guys have. Mm-hmm. And if the federal Liberals are, for whatever reason, shut out in the upcoming election from Alberta, by having Mayor Nenshi appointed to the Senate, they could conceivably argue that they have an Albertan at the cabinet table.
I could see that. Like, in part of it's made for fun election speculation. Like Naheed's not running again. He's young enough. He's only 50. He's got a lot of ambition, so he's not going to give up. But in knowing, Mayor Nenshi, he's a very vain man. And being in the Senate, even though it might get him into cabinet, that Senate's still where you finish a political career. It's not where you keep going. And member of Parliament, if he's eyeing the big chair, and that would be a guaranteed cabinet seat if he won it. Again, we're just guessing at this point. I mean, he might not go for either, but it's going to be interesting to watch as that develops. As you said, he would be a good one for Trudeau to throw into the Senate, but it would be giving a middle finger to Albertans who are concerned about Senate reform, and of course would infuriate a lot of people. It's interesting to watch.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, one of the other things about Western Canada that doesn't get a lot of press as far as ink in the press goes is the province of Manitoba. In Manitoba, we've actually seen a very close race developing between the Liberals and the Conservatives. And in fact, there's even pockets of NDP strength. In some ways, Manitoba is kind of reminding me of a sort of a mini political version of British Columbia, where we see these sort of three-way races happening depending where you are in that province. So there's a lot of interesting things happening in Western Canada, and the old playbooks from 20, 25 years ago, they don't necessarily apply anymore today.
No, well, and I think it's funny. There's people have always related, the West, the prairie provinces, with conservatism, but I think to be more correct, it'd be more like we're more inclined towards populism. I mean, it was a left populism in the past that was very strong out here. That's how the CCF came about, the NDP, prairie socialists. So it's not impossible in areas like Manitoba, Saskatchewan for NDP to make inroads, or perhaps some soft Liberals. Are you seeing much of that with the polls then in that breakdown?
Yeah, well, that's actually one of those things. So the NDP have actually developed, as I alluded to, some pockets of strength in Manitoba. They've obviously have some huge pockets of strength in British Columbia. And BC is one of those strange places now where you actually have four-way races because the Green Party is a legitimate political force, specifically in the Vancouver Island area of British Columbia. So that's adding a bunch of other things into the mix. And of course, the Green Party is in the process of attempting to commit political suicide, even though we're days away from a national election campaign, where their national executive is openly talking about suspending and expelling the membership of the leader of their own party. So there's a lot of interesting things happening right now.
Well, and the Green would have typically pulled votes from, NDP or Liberals. So I imagine the implosion of the Greens are making the left of center candidates all the more comfortable in Vancouver and areas where they used to have strength, or even a couple of Ontario spots. It's what a time to pull the pin and throw a grenade into your own party like that. Though I'm familiar with it in dealing with provincial parties. We love self-destructing our own parties at the worst of times as well.
Well, one of the other issues that's occurring in the West, and specifically in Alberta and Saskatchewan, is you have former Gadfly Conservative MP Maxime Bernier. He's created his People's Party of Canada, which, for all intents and purposes, is basically a form of controlled opposition. And that could spell big trouble for the Conservatives, because when we look at the regional breakdown of various polls, in some cases, Maxime Bernier is in double digits. And the only person that benefits is the Federal Liberal Party. So, every person who votes for Mr. Bernier's party is essentially casting a vote for the Federal Liberals, because what that does is it essentially castrates the Federal Conservative Party.
Yeah, well, and it's a frustration. I mean, that's the nature of Conservatives. Things I've been watching in here in Alberta is Jay Hill has been very hard at it with the Maverick Party. I'm seeing signs already appearing on roads in Calgary. They've got a number of candidates set up. I doubt they're going to be in contention for any seats. But again, if we're talking urban seats where we might have a 5-10% spread between those candidates, if the Maverick Party pulls that 5%, they can be a spoiler in a number of ridings right now.
Well, the Maverick people actually have an interesting message compared to some of the other, what I like to call fringe parties. So in the one case, you have the Liberals and the Conservatives that are both openly vying to form government because, generally that's what national federal political parties do. They exist in order to form government, to win government. Maverick, on the other hand, isn't interested in forming government. They have a specific message, which is basically, Canada's not working or Canada will never work. Vote for Maverick, it's a voice of independence, that sort of thing. That's a lot different than Mr. Bernier's message, which is basically vote for me and let's prevent Conservatives from being elected in order to help Liberals win seats. So, Maverick has a unique message which could appeal, to a lot of frustrated Albertans and folks in Saskatchewan that for various reasons are not happy with the state of Confederation today.
Yeah, and I'm not seeing a lot of the rumblings from the PPC out here. It does seem to be a place kind of more for, Maxime and the chip he has on his shoulder. We'll see how that comes out and unfolds, I guess, in the next coming months. So how long do you think? I mean, I know you believe that the Liberals are going to pull the pin really soon. Like, part of, though, what does happen, and we got the unofficial campaign going on, but as long as Trudeau doesn't pull the pin, he can campaign basically on the taxpayers' dime for a while. He flew to Calgary because he was making a transit announcement. It wasn't a campaign stop, it was a transit announcement. And he went to Vancouver and did the same thing. The second he calls a formal election, then suddenly the money has to come out of the Liberal coffers. So I suspect they might drag this out for a little bit longer yet into the summer before they make it formal for us and into a fall vote, perhaps. So where are you thinking there?
Well, I agree with you wholeheartedly. And I actually, look, I'm one of the outliers within the Conservative movement that believes that the Liberal Party may have found a winning election message that is enough to give them votes in key specific areas that they need for a majority. And the reason I argue this is because when Prime Minister Trudeau was in Alberta over recent weeks, he spent his time in Edmonton and Calgary making announcements connecting to public rail transit in both of your large urban cities. And then shortly after Alberta, he made the jump over to British Columbia and made announcements for Vancouver SkyTrain, so additional extensions to the SkyTrain. And I really do believe that the federal Conservatives have been looking, or sorry, the federal Liberals have been looking at the Ontario Provincial Conservatives. So Doug Ford's government over the last 2 years has made a series of announcements related to subways and LRTs in the Greater Toronto area, the Greater Hamilton area, that kind of thing. And what Mr. Ford's government has found is, as they've made those announcements, it's allowed them to pull a lot of vote back into the Tory tent provincially. And I do think that that the federal Liberals have been examining that and view that as an opportunity for growth in urban centers. The other big announcement that the Liberals have been doing in order to really ply vote away, if you will, from the New Democrats, is they made a series of announcements connected to daycare for childcare. So they know that British Columbia is going to be in play. They know that in British Columbia that there's this four-way political race, depending where you are in the province. And they know that the New Democrats, that childcare is a big deal for them. So by making those announcements and having the NDP Premier of British Columbia standing shoulder to shoulder with the Prime Minister on these announcements, that basically benefits the Liberals in that, in Vancouver and Victoria and all of those kinds of places. So, Look, I believe the election is going to be much sooner rather than later. And in fact, I believe we're probably looking at an election call sometime in the next week or two, because the polling data, despite a few polls that show the race tightening, it still indicates that they're in the lead. So if you're going to call an election, you do it while you're leading in the polls, not when you're behind in the polls.
Yeah, well, it's always a gamble. I'm sure one of their bigger fears, too, is that there might be a resurgence of the pandemic, and that could really affect negatively, but that there's nothing they can do to control that, and that might tempt them to go sooner rather than later. Right now, it seems to be looking better. Things are in retreat. The reopening in Alberta didn't turn into a disaster. Get out there, hit the ground, and renew their mandate. But it has been interesting to see things tightening a bit, at least, with Jagmeet Singh. He's not setting the world on fire. O'Toole certainly isn't either, but I mean, he's got the room. It's his to take if he could just find something that would resonate with voters and distinguish them. I mean, a lot of it seems to have been, I think you've kind of said it along those lines. You want to see where O'Toole is, just see where the Liberals were 2 weeks ago, because, he won't call it a carbon tax, but it's a carbon tax, and thus forth. He's swinging left rather than swinging right to try
and oddly enough, and look, I like this member of Parliament, Michelle Rempel-Garner. She's a Conservative member of Parliament from the Greater Calgary area. I apologize, I don't know the specific riding, but when the Prime Minister announced the rail transit initiatives over the last week in Calgary and Edmonton and these places, Michelle Rempel-Garner very quickly responded using her social media channels that the entire Conservative Party caucus that's based in Calgary is also supportive of public rail transit. And so, to your point, look where the Prime Minister is today, and at some point over the next 10 days to 2 weeks, you'll see Mr. O'Toole sort of try and make similar announcements.
Yeah, and playing catch-up isn't what's going to get him past that point of managing to even win a minority government. How are things looking, since we've got you from out there in Halifax? What do things look like out on the ground there? I mean, there's been, the progressive Conservatives used to do well out that way, at least. Have you got some good candidates on the ground here and there, or are things picking up a little in some spots?
Well, unfortunately for the Conservative Party in Atlantic Canada, all of its big pockets of strength that it used to have for generations and for decades. So if we look at places like Central Nova, which is where Peter MacKay is from, former cabinet minister, co-founder of the party, that kind of thing. Brian Mulroney was first elected to Parliament through the riding of Central Nova. Elmer MacKay, Peter's father, relinquished that seat in order for Brian to get into Parliament. The Conservatives are nowhere to be found. there's literally 2 or 3 places in Atlantic Canada where the Conservatives have a shot at winning, and that's it. They're primarily focused in New Brunswick. And again, one of the worries in New Brunswick is that that is an area that Mr. Bernier's, party of malcontents has basically developed a small pocket of strength that could potentially affect the outcome of Conservative members of Parliament from places like Tobique, Mactaquac, New Brunswick Southwest, Fundy Royal, that kind of thing. So the old Progressive Conservative Party, its days of being a dominant force in Atlantic Canada appears to have come to an end. And I don't see it turning around anytime soon, unfortunately.
Okay, and then how about
And I
Quebec?
say unfortunately, just to circle back, I say unfortunately because as I've argued on your program many times, I do believe it's incredibly important for Canada to have a competitive parliamentary party system where you have, an alternative to the government that's capable of forming government. And right now, I just don't see that happening.
Yeah, so another area that's always a difficult hornet's nest to try and predict in is Quebec. And the Bloc, it's funny, even though it tends to be a left-leaning province provincially, when the Quebecers go off of the Bloc, they often go towards Conservatives and back and forth between those two. How are the Bloc doing out there right now, and how are the Conservatives looking at Quebec? Because that's an area where sometimes they make some surprising gains.
Yeah, so I've actually had a chance to talk to a couple of Conservative members of Parliament that are from Quebec, and they're not holding out a lot of hope. So there are the most eastern part of Quebec, almost on the New Brunswick border, is a community called Rivière-du-Loup. And some of your viewers may remember that area because a famous Quebec politician by the name of Mario Dumont is from that part of Quebec. And that's an area that the federal Conservatives currently have now. And that seat is in play. And I'm hearing rumors that the current Conservative member of Parliament believes he may, in fact, be behind the Liberals right now. And we're seeing the same thing in other pockets in Quebec. So the Bloc are doing quite well in rural Quebec. And oddly enough, the federal Liberals are doing really good in Quebec right now. In most of the polling data that I've seen, they tend to be in first place, and usually by a significant margin, sometimes in the double digits over the Bloc. So the NDP support has essentially collapsed in Quebec, and the Green Party support is almost non-existent in Quebec. Mr. Bernier is not registering in Quebec either. So Quebec has essentially become a two-way race and sometimes a three-way race between the Liberals, the Bloc Québécois, and the Conservative Party of Canada.
Yeah, well, it's all swirling. It's going to be interesting to watch. And it's just good to get that regional breakdown because that is so important. As you said, with polls, they show that national snapshot, but it really matters a heck of a lot more where your votes are concentrated as opposed to that overall across the country picture on things. So.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's important, too, for Conservatives not to take Alberta and Saskatchewan for granted and to just assume that Calgary and Edmonton is going to be in the bag for them. Because one of the things that the Conservative Party would not want, from my perspective as an Easterner looking in, is you don't necessarily want the Liberal Party to form a toehold of strength in your urban centers. Because once that starts to develop in Calgary and Edmonton, it won't take long for it to start to spread throughout all of Calgary and Edmonton, as we've seen in urban centers all over Canada. You know, there was a time when the Conservatives used to be competitive in the Toronto area, and they're just, you can't find them anymore. If we look at Ottawa, for example, Ottawa-Gatineau, that was an area that Cabinet Minister Cannon in Harper's government used to get elected, Mr. Poilievre, that kind of thing. And now that's been reduced to just Mr. Poilievre. So what we're seeing across the country is that Conservatives are finding it more and more difficult to be elected in, Canada's most populous places, and that's our cities, whether it's in Vancouver or whether it's in Toronto or Winnipeg or Ottawa or Halifax or what have you. So my advice to Conservatives is to really get out there and start organizing in Calgary and Edmonton, because if you don't and you take it for granted, you may end up seeing a number of Liberal MPs being elected there.
Yeah, no, and they get those toeholds, and I mean, it'd be my words, not yours, but it's more like, as you almost framed it, an infectious disease, because once you got a couple in there, they can start spreading, and it becomes a bigger problem. So it's better to take a prophylactic approach and not get those Liberals into your city in the first place, and the Conservatives have really got to take care with that, there's no doubt. So I really appreciate that. We'll definitely have to check in once the election's called, which may or may not be really soon. It's definitely going to be happening, quite soon, without doubt. Where can people keep up with what you're up to and how you're tracking things and speaking on things, Clinton?
Yeah, so as your viewers can see on the screen, at Clinton Desveaux, you can find me on Twitter. And I'm always sharing stories. I don't always agree with everything I share, but I like to put stuff out there to get people thinking, get people talking. And I'll sometimes put out my own opinions and thoughts as well. So that's where they can find me.
Right on. Well, thanks again for coming on, Clinton. And as I said, I'm certain we'll be talking again soon.
Great. Thank you very much to you and your viewers. Looking forward to chatting with you another time.
Right on. All right. Well, thanks again to Clinton, and thanks to you guys for tuning in. There's going to be more shows coming down the pipe. We're going to get them regular. We're getting them more polished. Lots of stuff to talk about, as we saw with Clinton. Yeah, there's a whole election coming. We're really going to be covering that closely and talking about a great number of things as the summer progresses and issues as they come. I'm looking forward to it. As I said earlier, if you got comments to make or ideas, things such as that, suggested guests even, send an email to cmorgan@westernstandardonline.com. And again, we need subscribers. We need you guys to keep coming in and viewing. Hit subscribe on the YouTube channel, by the way. Hit subscribe on your favorite podcast site if you're listening to this on the audio, and make a comment on there. Write a review. This helps us get things rolling. It helps us keep the traffic rolling, get out to new people, and then that brings us more sponsorship. It closes that great circle of media life. We can pay the bills and keep making this stuff, and I can keep talking to you. So if you aren't a member of the Western Standard yet, get on there. Go to the westernstandardonline.com. Sign up for a membership. You'll find it's worth a few bucks to keep getting that regular content unhindered. Get behind that paywall. There's a lot of free stuff we provide, but we still have to pay those bills. We aren't taking any tax dollars. We never will. And we rely on you guys as sponsors to keep things rolling, as subscribers. Getting to our sponsors, though, thanks to you guys viewing and lots of wonderful numbers, fantastic readership. These guys are willing to buy a bit of space and sponsor these shows in order to keep coming to you. So the CCFR, that's the Canadian Coalition for Firearms Rights. These guys are standing up for you. They're suing the federal government right now on behalf of gun owners. I mean, the federal government is coming after you. They're using orders in council. They're using all sorts of tricks to try and take away your property, take away your right and ability to use and enjoy firearms responsibly, and they are fighting on your behalf. So go to firearmrights.ca and click Why Join, and they'll lay out exactly why you should join them, why you should support them, and how they're helping you out and firearm rights owners in general. And next is the Resistance Coffee Company. It's good to get fun sponsors. These guys, they are for the people who are sick of the woke political correctness, from so many of those companies. You go buy a mattress or a towel or something and find out that you've actually, in a sidelong way, donated your money, part of your money, to the Tides Foundation. You don't want to do that. You just wanted towels. Well, here, you can get coffee. It's good coffee, creative names, fun guys, and they give 10% of any of your purchases. You go to resistancecoffee.com and you can see where they're donating to. And they're giving 10% of that purchase portion to groups that are standing up for your rights, groups that are doing good things for you, things that you will appreciate. And just from the names of their coffee, whether it's Liberal Tears that I love and things such as that, they're not going to be given to any crazy left-wing causes. You can rest assured of that. And the coffee's good. I've ordered it. They deliver it right to your door. All sorts of volumes, good prices, good stuff. Go to resistancecoffee.com. Use the promo code Western Standard. So when you buy, the first time you buy, put Western Standard into the promo code. It'll give you a window, all one word, and you'll get another 10% off that first purchase. So, hey, 20% of that purchase is either going towards good causes or discount for you. Give these guys a try. It's really good coffee. It helps us out, and we can keep producing content for you. So thanks again for tuning in. We'll have another show up soon. Don't forget the Pipeline on Wednesdays, where Dave Naylor and Derek Fildebrand and I tend to chew on and go through the news. That show will continue going live, and Nathan is still doing his show through the week as well. And I'm looking forward to ranting at you on the next subject and with a new guest. Thanks for joining.